this lesson is America's True Discoverers, America's Aborigines. Please refer to Canvas for relevant text references.
By the end of this lesson, you will be able to define the term Aborigine. Recall the most popularly held theory explaining how the continent's first inhabitants got here. Identify the 3 stages of cultural development. Name the 4 major geographical regions and the groups inhabiting those regions. And finally, 2. Discuss the points of conflict between Aboriginal Americans and Europeans upon first contact.
Hello, Professor O here to answer the question, what's in a name? When Christopher Columbus, upon reaching the New World, mistook the Arawak people of the Caribbean Isles for the people of the East Indies, he thought he would name the people he saw Indios, because he thought he had reached India. The word Indian is the English derivative of this Spanish term. Today's archaeologists prefer the term Amerindians, while the most popularly politically correct moniker is Native American. In this class, we will refer to them as American Aborigines. Aborigine is a word that means the original inhabitant of a given area, and I think that's certainly fitting for the people we commonly know as Native Americans.
How did the Aboriginal Americans get to this part of the world, and where did they come from? The answers to these questions are found in theories advanced by archaeologists for many years. The most popular theory in use to explain the arrival of the natives in this hemisphere has been the land bridge theory. This theory states that Stone Age folk migrated across a land bridge that geologic patterns created. This land bridge is located where the present-day Bering Straits are today, the narrow body of water that separates the extreme northwestern edge of Alaska from the extreme northeastern part of Siberia. Early hunter-gatherer tribes subsequently dispersed all over the continent following herds. Population dispersal occurred when some tribes settled in their new environs, cultivating their respective surroundings to suit their needs. We must realize this is a process that took hundreds and hundreds of years to realize. Despite what people may prefer to call them, understand that whether one says Indian or Native American or Amerindian, he or she is using a generic term to describe a diverse group of people. Just as the term European encompasses a diverse array of nationalities, Native Americans do not belong to a monolithic group and encompasses a wide array of peoples with diverse cultures and habitats. The customs these Aboriginal communities created were generally born out of geographic and economic considerations. The ways these people adapted their lives around the environment they lived in is what the rest of this lesson will be about. Now, regardless of where Aboriginal Americans eventually settled, all of them went through 3 stages of cultural development. It is also the case that societies the world over went through these same stages as well. As was the case with Aboriginal Americans, all societies underwent these processes for long periods of time that lasted several centuries. Those 3 stages were the big game hunter stage, the hunter-gatherer stage, and the first farmer stage. The first stage was the big game hunting stage. In this stage of cultural development, tribes lived a nomadic existence, meaning they moved around a lot, most likely in pursuit of food. They led subsistence lifestyles, meaning they raised just enough food to feed themselves and their families. They lived in undeveloped communities and non-complex cultures that had little in the way of governance or structure. If one considers technology to be any tool or technique developed to improve people's lifestyle, then technology at this stage that we should consider as fitting this definition would include things like spears, bows and arrows, like the head of one shown here. Think of other forms of technology, likely developed at this stage, that would have assisted these early people in their acquisition of food. In the hunter-gatherer stage of cultural development, we see, in addition to the introduction of certain technologies to improve standards of living, we see the beginnings of more sophisticated cultures. People aren't moving around quite so much, and as a result, the population begins to grow. This intermediate stage of cultural development ultimately leads to the last stage of cultural development, which was known as the first farmer stage. In the first farmer stage of cultural development, we see the emergence of full-scale communities featuring a more permanent population settlement pattern. We also see the emergence of a more complex economic system that features, among other things, labor specialization and trade. Now, the question we must ask ourselves is, why do we see the changes in the first farmer stage that we see take place? As this diagram illustrates, more stable food sources led to increased populations. Because humans were no longer investing every single waking moment in the acquisition of food, there was more time to mate and create families. More families meant the growth of communities where populations could continue to grow. Greater populations also led to food surpluses. Food surpluses led to labor specialization, which in turn led to trade. All of these factors are interconnected and are very much at the core of cultural evolution during the first farmer stage. In Part 2 of our lesson, we'll take a closer look at North American indigenous cultures in existence at the time of the arrival of the Europeans.